Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the We're So Young podcast. I'm Diana Garley, and I'm so excited to have you guys back here for another episode. Today, we're featuring Steve Gladstone, an actor, writer, critic, and overall amazing man. Just a little background on this episode. We recorded at Steve's charming apartment in Hollywood, Florida, so you might hear a little bit of his service dog, Billy. Just wanted to give you the heads up. Enjoy this episode of the We're So Young podcast.
You're the top, you're the tower of pizza.
We have one of my favorite people on the planet, Steve Gladstone.
You're one of my favorite people, too.
Oh, yeah? Well, how fortunate am I? So tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve.
Okay, well, I was born. And then, I was born and grew up in Coral Gables and went to secondary school here, elementary, junior, and senior high school. And then when you're Jewish, after high school, you go to college, right? So I went to University of Florida, and that's where I studied psychology as my major, and I minored in music and theater. And graduated there and came back here and didn't know what the hell I was going to do because I realized I was not going to become a psychologist. So I said, let me try this acting thing. So I started acting in South Florida. And back then, in the 70s, oops, I gave away my age, didn't I?
Age doesn't matter here.
That's right. There's no boundaries there.
No.
So I started acting, and I was making a whopping $50 a week with a traveling show called Minnie's Boys. And then one of the guys dropped out, so I was playing then 3 characters, and they offered me a 4th character and bumped me to $75. And I was like rolling in dough. Anyway, I did a few shows, and then I wasn't doing any shows, and nobody was hiring me. So I said, I need a job. And I fell into retail. And for 21 years or thereabouts, I was selling consumer electronics and digging it. And then I kept moving up the ranks, the corporate ladder, as it were. And
so you kept changing ideas of what you wanted to do with your life, and why did this come about? Why did you feel that like every time you had to do that change?
Well, more than ideas, I needed to make money.
Yeah.
and I knew I was not going to go on to get a master's in psychology or a doctorate, which you really need to make money in that profession. Oh, by the way, I'm blind. So I said,
dun, dun, dun.
I said, I mean, I had been going progressively blind since I was 17, but I could still see a little bit. And then by the time I was like 35, I couldn't see anymore. But here I was, going blind, got married, got a job, still could see. Fast forward several years, went totally blind, still doing my job, still being a father and a husband. And then suddenly I got divorced. I didn't have my retail job anymore. And I'm entirely blind and sitting in the middle of my new living room in corrugated hell thinking, wait a second, I need to set up my apartment. I've never lived alone as a blind guy before. So I called my sister-in-law, who was, really snappy at that stuff. She came down with one afternoon, boom, set up my place. It was great. But now I was leaving a job and I was by myself. And I said, well, I want to act, but is anybody going to hire a blind guy? And I said, well, there's one way to find out. Go audition, dude.
Go do it.
So I did it. And I auditioned and I got a gig. And then I auditioned some more and got some more gigs. And meanwhile, rewind a couple of years, I actually met a couple who started a production business in Coral Gables when I was selling hi-fi, and we struck up a really nice relationship. And they said, hey, you're an actor and you have an interesting face, which is true. I'm very interesting looking. And they said, come over and audition for this commercial. And I said, oh, okay. And I did it and loved it. And they kept hiring me. And then I got other gigs on camera. And then I started getting bit parts in movies. But I couldn't do theater, which is my first love because I was in retail. So anyway, when I left retail, I said, let me go back to theater and see what happens. So I started getting gigs and then joined the union, the Actors Equity.
How old were you when you joined Equity?
I was like close to 50.
Oh, okay.
Because I actually joined SAG before I was married. And then 4 or 5 years later, I got married and I was working the retail thing. And but I didn't join Equity, which is really where I started acting because it wasn't in my mind. And then, as my life changed and I got married and I got the quote-unquote real job, I couldn't do stage work. I tried doing it once while I was doing the full-time retail thing, and it just didn't work because I was absolutely exhausted. So when I left it, first I got divorced and moved into my own apartment. So now I was looking for work. So I said, okay, let's see here. Yeah. So I started getting gigs. And as I got a few more gigs, that's when I joined Equity. Long way of answering your question, isn't it?
It's good, though. It's good.
So I joined Equity. And I started doing lots of theater, not so much film work, and here I am today, an older actor, and thankfully there are still really good parts for older actors.
You work a lot, Stevie G.
Yeah, it was like I didn't know, but as long as people wanted to hire me, it was cool. And the strangest thing about it is that. I rarely ever played blind characters. It was like really weird when I first started doing film. All my characters could see, and I didn't think much of it. I didn't care. A gig is a gig. And when I started doing stage work, all my characters could see, and that was fun. Finally, I did land a really cool gig as a blind character, and the funniest thing about it, I didn't know how to be blind. I had to call the Lighthouse for the Blind, saying, I come from a sighted world. I know how my mannerisms are sighted or are sight oriented. People always tell me I don't look like a blind guy. To which I say, well, how's a blind guy supposed to look?
Right.
But anyway, so as I got older, I'm saying, why can't I play more blind characters? Well, there's very few blind characters in the literature and in breakdowns on sets for commercials and film. I'm going like, wow, something wrong with that picture. Anyway, so I started recently marketing or promoting myself as a blind actor for the first time, if you can dig that.
Yeah.
And sort of suggesting to directors, I say, why can't the crazy next door neighbor be a blind guy? Or why can't, if you're selling soup, why can't the guy at the table over be in a wheelchair? Why not? Right. I'm otherwise appropriate for the role. So my last gig, actually, that happened. I answered an audition for Our Town, that good old American play.
Right.
And I wrote a note to the casting director and say, hey, I noticed you're doing an interesting new diverse take on Our Town. How about a blind character? ? And they wrote back, yeah, this is interesting. Come on down and read. So I did, and I got the role, and I played the funeral director as a blind guy, and the director loved it, and we figured out how to do it. quote unquote blind. It was really cool. So
that was a really great piece. I was able to see.
oh
that,
yeah. It was neat. It was neat.
The whole vision of our town as the way that Michelle, the director, did it was just so interesting and beautiful. It was a really cool production.
Yeah, using Spanish and Creole mixed up with English. It was really nice.
So I've had the pleasure of working with you on stage.
Yes, we have.
Multiple times. And something that always keeps me in awe is your way of not just memorizing lines, because you come in off book, but how you deal with blocking and the movements on stage and everything. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. When I went back to the stage, it becomes a collaborative effort between me and the director. So what I do is I count steps from off left. Let's say I have to walk in 7 steps, turn right, deliver a line, or if there's a carpet as part of this set, I can feel the difference between the wood stage floor and the carpet, which gives me a signal to say, oh, okay, I'm where I need to be, or when I hit the carpet, turn and take 2 more steps, or find a chair or a table or a set piece that I can touch, or walk in with another actor, like we're buddies and I have my hand on his shoulder or her shoulder, and we walk in, and all the actors are fantastic when I'm working with them, because we work together so that if my character is not blind, which is most of the case, it never prints to the audience that I'm a blind guy on stage. And with rehearsal and doing it over and over again, we smooth it out. So, set pieces, other actors, counting steps. In fact, one time when I was doing St. Joan, the George Bernard Shaw play, I had to do a lot of work without other actors. And so I was the bishop of Rem, and I had to carry this big staff. And so what they did is they tacked in some 1/2-inch dowel, wooden dowel, and they tacked it in and made like a little road map for my foot, so I could navigate the stage, which I needed to do. So the audience can't see the little pieces of dowel tapped into the stage, but my foot can find it. So little tricks like that, and it always works out. If a director wants to work with me, we can always work it out. That's the deal. And sometimes directors don't want to do it. I know it. I don't get hired. Okay, there are other people, other directors who want me. They want what I bring to the stage, and they hire me, and we work it out. So
that's. Yeah. I mean, you just have to, you don't only memorize your lines, like you have to memorize so much. I mean, as actors, we have to learn our blocking, but it's just, it's like code for you. It's
well, to your point, what happens sort of naturally in my brain is that I do come in the first day off book, as you mentioned, but as I'm being blocked, the block, it kind of sticks itself to the word or the sentence that I'm saying, so that it becomes muscle memory. So if I say, "Oh, well, she's walking in," no, it's and I'm trying to think of a scenario. Give me a second. So that if I'm delivering a line, and I know at a certain point another character's walking in, on the line I can turn my head and go, "Oh, Harvey, it's about time," and so it all sort of synchronizes together.
Right. So, Steve, can we talk about you going blind a little bit?
Sure.
So you said that you found out when you were 17. What prompted you to go and find out?
Well, I'll tell you.
What happened?
When you're Jewish, your mother takes you to 85 doctors a year. So I was going through my routine doctor visits with my mom, and the primary guy and the dentist and the eye doctor. And so I was going through my routine visit, and I had been experiencing some night blindness. So I mentioned that to him. So he's looking in my eye, he dilates my eye, looks in and says, I see something here. So anyway, he sent me to Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, and went through all these different tests, and it was a long day. It was like a 6-hour day. And Dr. Norton at the time, I always remember Dr. Norton. He was like a cross between Truman Capote and Elmer Fudd. And he came in and said, Stephen, you have a very rare eye condition. It's called retinitis pigmentosa. And I said, so, okay, what's that? And he says, well, you're going blind progressively. Okay. Will I go entirely blind? Well, I don't know, but you may retain a very small, precious piece of vision. And his only advice to me, because there was no cure, there was no way to arrest it. We call it RP for short. That's the affectionate name. So he told me to prepare by doing sports that don't require being able to see.
What does that even mean?
What does that mean? I said, okay. Anyway, when you're 17 and you're told you're going blind and you can still see, you just ignore it. And that's what I did. I just ignored it. I could still see fine. Did
you realize what the magnitude was?
No, not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Yeah,
I could see, and I said, okay. I drove a car. I went to college. I played varsity sports in college. But what's really interesting is that, you see, with this disease, you begin to lose little pieces of vision over time, but it takes a very long period of time. And what the brain does, it kind of fills in like watercolors, so that if there's a hole in your vision, your little bio computer fills it in, so you don't see blank spots. You see a perfect scene in front of you. So, but much later in my life, I reminisce about a couple of times where I go, oh, something happened. I was playing volleyball at the university, and I'm pretty tall, and I could spike the ball real well at the net. And so the ball would come over, I would see it, and I would leap up and boom, strike it down, and that was real good. So one time, I saw the ball coming over the net, and I jumped up to greet it, and I came down, and it was all net. I missed the ball. But it didn't occur to me why I missed it. I just missed it, and I got razzed by my teammates, and I didn't think much of it. But years later, I realized that ball was going so fast, it went into my blind spot, and I didn't see it. I go, oh, yeah. So I was 17. I was probably, I'm not exactly sure, but I was probably somewhere between 30 and 35 when I lost about 90% of my vision. I can't even remember. I think I saw my son, who was born when I was 31. I remember seeing him at his little baby face, but not much after that.
Was that your first child or your second child?
My first child. I don't think I ever saw my daughter, and by that time I was 35. So, but I'm not sure. I have a very vivid imagination, so I think, did I see her? But I can't check it out. I can't see her.
Right. And
so,
do you, because you were able to see growing up, do your memories involve actual people and visions?
yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's like I cherish the people I saw in my previous visual life, and they come back to me very vividly in my brain. But I know certainly they don't look like that anymore. My good friends, my family, my brother, my brother's wife. But I attach those earlier pictures in my head, and they like it very much.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
They love that. And when I meet new people, I have no idea what they look like, but sometimes if I'm interested, I'll pull a friend aside and say, hey, give me the specs on her, you know. And so I'll sometimes play that game where people often like to say, well, Steve, what do you think I look like? And if I know a little bit, I'll say, well, you're about 5'5". You've got dirty blonde hair. And they go, oh, you're amazing. And I go, not, but...
Cheater.
But yeah, cheater. I still dream visually. And sometimes I dream in color. I really miss color because color is a different thing. This sounds weird, but it's obviously involved with sight, but it's also emotional. So sight is one thing, and I dearly miss that. But I also miss color as a separate entity. So I lost my color first. I didn't realize it. And then I lost my black and white after that. That's the way this disease works. So, but, you know, I still sometimes forget I'm blind. So that I'll be talking to somebody, and they'll make a reference to something over there, and then, oh, yeah, I can't see it. Or, you know, when I'm talking with people, they forget I'm blind, and they'll say, oh, here, what do you think of this? And I'll say, I can't see it. And they go, oh, yeah. Or even my housekeeper comes over and says, it's right over there. And I'll say, where is there? And, oh, yeah, okay. So it's weird because people that I know who are born blind don't have the same imagination that I do. Right. They never saw. So for them, it's no big whoop, really. And in fact, many of them don't even care about seeing. In fact, two of them get annoyed when people say, oh, let me teach you a little about blue, and they put an ice cube in their hand, or put your hand on a warm stove. This is pink, and if it got hotter, it would be red, and going like, oh, come on. So it's like, but for me, you know, I get pretty agitated sometimes because I want to see. But for the most part, you know, you adjust, you get used to it, and you go on. It's like, you know, if you wanna, well, I hate to wax philosophic, but if you wanna live life, you know, life is Plan B. That's my philosophy. Life is Plan B. So if Plan A doesn't work, which doesn't, as you know, as everybody knows, doesn't always come out the way you want it to, you got Plan B, which is a workaround or a different path. And you just start exploring it, and you say, okay, now I'm doing it. So, you know, you can be a victim, or you can be a hero. I choose hero. So it's a workaround. he didn't say anything, but I lost hearing on my left side about 10 years ago.
Really? I didn't know that.
Well, actually, it's longer than that. 15 years ago, I was playing Joseph II, the Emperor Joseph, in Amadeus. A week before the show closed, I thought I was going to lose my voice and say, oh, man. But I woke up the next morning and I was fine. But my ear was clogged. Didn't think much of it. Long story short, I started sensing I was not hearing quite right. Got checked out, and they did all the tests, and they said, you have sudden hearing loss. And I said, okay. When will I suddenly get it back? And they said, you probably won't. And I said, I've been here before with my eyes. I said, so to this day, it's still called sudden hearing loss. Isn't that exotic?
Yeah.
So I wound up getting a cochlear implant about 8 years ago because it wasn't just sudden deafness. It was, I went deaf over about 3-4 year period. So, it sounds weird, but I already had the trial run with my eyes, so I was a little more prepared for losing another sense, but it made me nervous because what if I lost my other ear? I would be totally deaf and blind. That would certainly be a drag. So, but fortunately, my right ear is great, and I've got a cochlear implant in my left ear. There it is. See it? There it is. And so I had to deal with that, and at the same time, I lost a little balance, as you know. You've helped me on stage as my daughter a few years ago.
Yeah. And more than once, actually. I've played your daughter.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's become more challenging to be on stage because I have to deal now with this balance issue. But, plan B, right?
Right.
You find workarounds and
in those workarounds, in these plan Bs, do you find that you've acquired some sort of talent that people with sight would not have?
No, I'm I'm not sure what works for any other person than me. So, I do, if somebody says, oh, my eyes are bloodshot, and they get all freaked out, or they now have to go get glasses for the first time in their life because their vision is a little blurry, I say, oh, you poor baby. So, I understand it, but, I'm a little hardened by my disabilities because when people complain about, not quite hearing right, but they can still hear, right? Or, getting contact lenses, it's like, oh, you're just amateurs at this.
Right.
So, I really don't think I'm that special. It's just that I guess it's a choice, maybe, or it's something in your DNA. I'm not sure. Maybe, probably a combination of both. Just to keep going and adapting and figuring out your workarounds, which is not always clear. In fact, it never is clear at first. You just have to go do it, give it a shot, see if it works out. And if it doesn't, then you do something else. It's like when I went back to the theater after being a blind guy, I said, well, the only way to find out if I'm going to get gigs is to audition. And if nobody hires me, then I'll do something else. I'm not sure what that something else will be, but there's something to do. So it's just my orientation, I guess.
I love that. I think it's funny that you say you're like hardened because I don't feel that at all. I feel, very inspired by you, and I feel like you have such a positive outlook on life, and regardless of your situation, just the simple fact of being like, well, if that's not going to work, we can try something new. I think it's so hard for people, and I think I can speak for people my age right now. The idea of just doing something unfamiliar is so terrifying, and so that's why I really wanted to have you on the show, because I feel like you're the complete opposite of that. You're like, well, here I am, let's do it, let's try something new, and I love that about you.
Well, look, I've learned over the years, a lot of people get totally freaked out by the idea of going blind. I get that, I do. But I also know that most of them, not all, but most of them, if they did go blind, they would go through their process, depression, unsurety, but they would figure it out eventually. I do believe that. The thought of going blind is probably worse than the reality, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, my process, preparing for blindness, imminent blindness, was 12, 15 years. I didn't do anything to prepare to interact with the world as a blind guy. I didn't learn how to use a screen reading software until I was in my 40s.
What is that for people that don't?
Well, I've got a computer, a PC, and what you see on the screen. Hold on a second. Billy, check. Come here, Billy. Come here, Billy.
He's over here with me. He missed me.
Yeah, he does miss you.
I haven't seen you in so long.
Yeah, Billy, sit. Sit.
He has such a beautiful coat. Just like nice and shiny.
Down. Good boy. That's a good boy. Stay right there. Be cool. Okay. Where were we? Really?
Hey there, Billy.
Oh, really? So,
Your software.
yeah. Well, one thing led to another, but strangely, I tried to learn Braille in my late 20s and had no patience for it. So when I was in business, I was using a series of little micro cassettes for all my notes, blah, blah, blah. Real pain in the butt. So I met this guy who was in grad school doing his doctoral thesis on adaptive equipment for blind people. And he had this little box with 7 keys on it. I had never learned to type. And the 7 keys were the 7 dots that you could type with. I said, oh, this is interesting. 7 keys are a lot less than 26 or a keyboard. I can learn that. So I learned how to type in Braille. And I had this little electronic gizmo I could take notes on. Changed my life. It was fantastic. So then I backed into a computer and learned how to do that. And I have the screen reading software. It's called JAWS, Jaws. And what it does, everything that you, Diana, see on the screen, all the words, my text-to-speech reads it out loud to me. So it doesn't do graphics, obviously, or bling. It doesn't like bling very much, but any words or any links, it reads to me what it is, so I can, listen to emails or write emails or do Word documents or surf the net, navigate YouTube and Wikipedia and all that stuff, because it's reading to me out loud, which is really great. So, adaptive assistive technology. Oh, what a world. Fantastic. Because now, my fifth career, I'm a writer, so I write, and I'm totally independent as a result, because I can write, I can edit, I can copy and paste. I don't need anybody to help me do that. And be very, very self-sufficient as I always prefer to be. So it's really cool stuff. It's really cool stuff.
So, Steve, can you tell me what is the most vivid memory you can remember seeing? So I remember you saying about how you're not sure what your son looked like. Can you tell me about your most vivid visual memory?
There are many. Speaking of color, speaking of a visual memory, this freaked me out. I was through my progression of going blind, and I was walking on a sidewalk, and suddenly out the right corner of my right eye, I caught this electric patch of blue out of nowhere. I said, "What's that?" And my friend said, "Oh, a girl just walked by, and she's wearing electric blue shorts." I didn't see the girl. I didn't see the leg. Wish I had. But I saw this electric blue patch. I said, "Oh my God, I lost color years ago." But that blue patch let me know I lost color. I didn't realize I lost color.
Wow.
And so I'm going like, oh, yeah. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's what popped into my brain when you said it. Yeah, no, I play this game with myself. Did I see the original Star Wars? I think I saw C-3PO. I think I remember R2-D2 looking like a vacuum cleaner, but I'm not always sure I saw it. Maybe someone described it, and I created an image in my head. I'm not so. The mid to late 70s are kind of foggy, though I could see. And there are so many stories about, as I was going blind on stage back then that I could tell you, but we'd be here all day.
When did it click for you that this was something that was really going to happen? Yeah,
that's clear. I was driving home from a manager's meeting. I was in retail. I had a 1969 pink Plymouth Fury convertible.
Ooh.
It was a bad ride.
Ooh, sexy.
And I had the top down, and I was driving home, and suddenly I hear this voice, pull over, now. And I said, oh my God, it's the voice of God. He's speaking to me. So I pulled over. I was on I-95, and this police officer comes out and asks for my driver's license. And I give it to him. And he's looking at me, and he said, what's wrong with you? I said, huh? And he looks down at my driver's license. He looks at me. He looks down at my driver's license. He looks at me. He does this like 3 or 4 times. I said, what? He says, well, you don't appear to be stoned or drunk. What's wrong? I said, well, what's wrong, officer? And he said, well, for starters, you are using 3 lanes and you're only entitled to 1. I said, okay, uh-oh. And it was late at night, And I said, oh, really? I said, all right, officer, let me tell you. I told him the story. I'm going blind. I was 26 years old. And it's hard to give up driving in Miami.
Oh, yeah, no.
And he said, well, you are a hazard to yourself and other people. And I said, okay. And he said, well, son, I knew something was really wrong with you. And I said, how'd you know? And he handed me back my driver's license. It was my Visa card. I said, oh, oops. Okay. So I said, yeah, now's the time. That was it. And I said, officer, if you don't slap me with a big old ticket, I promise you I will drive my car home and hang up my keys forever. And he thought for a moment. He said, well, can you give me a good deal on a CD player? And that was it. I drove home. I must confess, I did drive a couple times after that, but not really. It's like, that was it. So I hung up my keys. I was 26, and that was it. I could still see, but it was unsafe to drive and cross streets, and from there it was pretty much downhill for the next 4 or 5 years, visually downhill. But I just kept going. Okay, I can't do this. Well, I'll do that. Again, work around.
Right.
So.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Billy. Billy the dog, who we've been hearing a little
Billy
bit.
the dog is my third guide dog.
Hi, Billy.
I probably should have gotten a guide dog, my first guide dog, Recon, before I did, but I remember talking to this guy I mentioned about doing his master's thesis on adaptive equipment. He was going off to Texas for his PhD, and he was getting his first guide dog. And I asked him why, and he said, because I want to walk around the campus with more dignity. I said, oh, dignity, yeah. I wasn't feeling very dignified. I said, that makes a lot of sense. And in the same week, I spoke with a woman who was getting her second guide dog. I asked her why, and she said, well, my 5-year-old daughter is starting to feel responsible for me. And I want to get, no, this is also her first guide dog, come to think of it, yeah. I want to get a guide dog so she doesn't feel so responsible. I said, oh, and my daughter was 5 at the time. So both of those things said, time to get a guide dog. So I went off to guide dog school. It was fantastic. It was great. I was there for a month.
You had to play with dogs all day?
Yeah, all kind of great dogs, big dogs, happy dogs. Dogs love to work. And I learned a lot about me, about being a blind guy, and about people and life from that experience. Dogs work for praise. Well, so do we, right? Yeah. And so it was like, so I got my first guide dog, and I could walk now. I didn't have to walk with anybody. I could just walk with the dog, and we could move fast through the environment, and people started treating me differently, as opposed to people, what I call benign discrimination. Like if you're blind, you can't do anything, and people start treating you like you're a fragile flower, and like they would be so surprised that I was married, that I had children, that I grocery shop, that I go to Walgreens and buy my medication myself. It's like, come on, folks. I may be blind, but I'm not disabled. I'm just blind, right?
Right.
So when I got the dog, it was an instant icebreaker. So people started treating me very differently. They would look at the dog and say, "Oh, what a great dog!" Hey? Well, and suddenly I'm a rock star. I'm a cool guy because I got the dog. So that was really nice. And so we're tooling around doing our thing, and Billy, my guide dog here, who's been wanting to insert himself into this interview, he's my third guide. He's 9 years old now. Because of my balance issues, I don't work a guide dog as much as I used to because it's kind of challenging. So, but he's really fantastic. And as you know, I used to bring him to the theater and put him on tie down. Funny story, my first guide dog, I was doing The Hunchback of Notre Dame musical, and there was a Paris scene. We had to be dancing and joyous in the streets of Paris. And when I bring my guide dog to the theater, I put him on tie down. I take his leash and put it around the leg of a table, so he'll be calm and everything. Well, I'm dancing in the streets of Paris with my fellow actors, and suddenly I hear the jingle of a car. I'm going, uh-oh. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly Recon bounds onto the stage, and he's dancing with everybody, and the audience erupts. They love it, and Recon is jumping up and down, and we're dancing. I'm going like, oh, I didn't put him on tie down. Oh my God. I took off my costume belt and fashioned a leash and put it around him, and I danced off stage, and everybody applauded. And after the show, the director said, let's keep that in.
Oh.
It was great. But, I would bring him I would bring my dogs to the theater, and everybody loves a guide dog. Everybody loves Big Billy. He's
Yeah,
cool.
He's just the sweetest.
He's the sweet boy.
He's the sweetest. Oh.
In fact, I recall you have a picture of him licking your face.
I do. I have several pictures of Billy, but yeah, my favorite one is that it's like 3 pictures of him progressively licking my face. It's just like,
That's pretty good.
yeah. He was so much younger then.
Yes.
He looks like an old guy now.
Yeah, he's got a little grayness going on.
He has some gray on his snout. He's black. He's a black dog, but he has some gray.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so cute. So, Steve.
Yeah.
To finish off this interview, I like to think of new things. And so, is there anything that you've done recently that's like new or something that you hadn't tried before that in the last, 6 months that you've tried for the first time? Whether it's food or, anything.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind in terms of new, interesting, engaging work is writing. I'm flirting with the idea of writing a memoir.
Okay, that's huge.
I'm writing some notes. Lots of people have told me that I should write my memoir because they find my story fascinating, and I've never found it fascinating. But when somebody says you're a horse, you look at them funny. What a second person calls you a horse, you think about it, and when a third person calls you a horse, you saddle up, right? so I'm thinking, all right. So and I've got like 1,587 poems that I've written over my lifetime. So I'm thinking of bonding those together and
Wow.
doing something with those. So that's the new stuff really in my head. But in terms of new adventure, that's a fine thought. I've been adjusting to my balance stuff, and venturing out more than I have been the past year or so. So I've been up to North Carolina and hiking as a blind, dizzy guy, and going over uneven surfaces and small little brooks of flowing water, which can be unnerving because you don't want to fall down and break your gizzard, but I figured go slow, let your feet give you information. So going up and down around, that's been really novel and adventuresome. For a sighted person, no big whoop. For a blind, dizzy guy, whoop.
Yeah, it's not just like the uneven ground, but just like everything you hear around and like where are you going, and that's really exciting. So you did that all in North Carolina?
Yeah, and it's like
it's also such a different environment than Miami.
Oh yeah. It's up on Beach Mountain where at night it goes into the 40s, and during the day it's in the 60s, and then during winter it snows and stuff. But you see, when you have these balance things, your whole world is kind of like being always in a state of light turbulence. So you have to kind of like balance your actual movements with what's going on inside your head. So for me, the hiking has been really, really something challenging and nerve-wracking and oh, so cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you can even like, just the idea that you just turn everything into a positive. I love that about you. So can you leave this podcast with a little bit of words of wisdom, maybe elaborating more on your plan B, and just for the people that feel like they can't try something new or putting things on the shelf, and what do you have to say to them?
You gotta be brave, and listen to yourself. If you're making excuses, stop it. Stop the excuses and give it a shot, because you first have to fail in order to get good. So you give it a shot. And if you fail, get up and do it again, and do it about 18 times. And if you keep failing, but you get a sense that you're getting somewhere, keep going. And if you get to a point where you say, nah, not for me, then there's always something else you can try. So it's a matter of just doing it, not overthinking it, not trying to figure it all out in one fell swoop. Just start it. It's like, if you've never written a poem, then just sit down with a blank sheet of paper and write crazy, and then, I guess it was Hemingway who said, write drunk, edit sober. That's, that's life right there. It's just do it. Don't worry about the end game, the end product, or what people think of you. You just give it a shot. See where it leads you. It's going to be great.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Well, I'm so happy you came on. Thank you for doing this interview.
Well, thank you for having the interest in me.
You're the youngest man I know right now for We're So Young podcast, so I'm really grateful that you came.
Well, thank you. I love you.
I love you, Stevie G. Thanks again for listening to the We're So Young podcast. Like what you've been hearing? Help spread the word. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate, review, and tell your friends about We're So Young. And don't forget to follow us on our socials, at We're So Young Podcast on Instagram, at We're So Young Pod on Twitter, and We're So Young Podcast on Facebook. Let's all get inspired to try new things together. That's it for now. Tune in on the 1st and the 15th of each month for new episodes. Until then, step out of your comfort zones and try new things, 'cause we're so young.